Well,
Good
good morning. Good morning,
morning.
Facebook Live. Good morning, YouTube Live. We're back for another day to give you an amazing tip that will help you in your relationship. Now,
Yes.
every single morning we've been coming and connecting with people all over the world because they're looking for something to get them through the day, to get them through the week. And one thing we realized over the last few days, we've been doing this 3-day live home edition Audacity of Marriage conference. The number one issue or struggle that people have in their relationship is communication.
Absolutely.
And so we said, you know what, if people are struggling with communication, how about we give people some practical steps and tools and tricks to help them overcome their greatest challenge?
Yeah. I mean, the problem is that we're communicating, we're talking, but we're hearing two different things all the time. And so what happens is that we get so frustrated by what we perceive that our partner is saying that we shut down, we're never heard, we're angry, we're frustrated, and we just keep on building these resentment. And when we were talking to couples over the last couple of days and doing different activities and hearing them say how they intend to let go of some things, we heard some things and we were like, wow, that's good. People really need to learn how to set some boundaries and honor them so that they can communicate and be heard, because it's more than about being right. Yeah, it's great when you're right. Okay. But more than being right, it's about wanting to be truly heard. You know, when we're communicating with somebody, sometimes we can walk on eggshells and tiptoe around it, trying to get our message to our spouse. And because of lenses and what you've said a long time ago, they've already preconceived what you're going to say. And the emotions are already up there and you're already got your walls up of resistance. So we want to talk to you today about how you can get past those walls of resistance.
Now, one of the number one issues that people have is unresolved conflict. And a conflict is nothing more than having two different opinions and you can't come to terms, right? And so the reality is you need to learn how to defuse an argument, because a difference of opinion, if you are drenched, soaked, and saturated in your emotion, it can turn into an argument.
Yeah.
And then when you bring emotions in, you'll never be able to resolve anything that you're discussing.
And if there's unresolved issues anyway, the emotions are always under level there. Like there's low level anger always there. So there are certain issues that you do not have permission to even approach. And don't even deal with that, because if I mention those things, they will be shut down. So we've got to deal with this and begin to unearth some of these issues and emotions so that we're conscious and we can actually follow some rules to get heard and get to the solution.
And I think let's just jump into it. How do you diffuse an argument? There are 3 steps. The first step is what you just said, to establish rules of engagement. Before you even enter into the conversation, you have to make sure that the setting and the atmosphere is right. So some of those rules could be knowing when to talk, because timing is everything. Because if your energies are low early in the morning when you just wake up, maybe that's not the best time to engage in a conversation because you're not your best. Or maybe having conversations too late at night, knowing that you have to get up the next day for work, that's not the best time to engage. So knowing when to have the conversation and also where, because having the right conversation in the wrong place can be exposing. So you have to create a safe environment for you and your spouse.
And you can't forget the how. You know, we're not going to be using absolutes when we're talking. We're not going to be accusatory. We're going to make sure that the boundaries that we set in our relationship obviously are unique, but for us, there's no cursing and swearing at each other.
Right.
I'm not going to cuss you out. I'm not going to call you outside of your name. And then there's no screaming, because when we're screaming, how are we being heard, right? So these are some of the rules that you can begin to look at. What's going on inside of your relationship? You need to look at when you guys are trying to communicate, what happens that causes the shutdown. Is it raising your voice? Is it calling somebody outside their name? Is it absolutes every time, all the time? You never, you always. These things shut your partner down and you can't communicate.
That's absolutely right. Now, once you've done that, the next step is, listen, if you are reaching an impasse in your relationship and you seem like you just can't go anywhere, take a pause. Take a pause, because once you're too emotionally infused, then it goes nowhere, because emotions are not logical. Emotions don't make sense. And so you've got to be able to pause and come back to the conversation in order to resolve it. The problem is some people have this desire to avoid confrontation, to avoid issues, to avoid pressure. And so when we say, let's talk about it later. That is a dream for a person who just wants to keep the peace, and later winds up becoming never. And so there's got to be a rule where you establish, all right, well, if we take a break, then we're coming back in an hour. We're coming back at the end of the day. We have to resolve this issue so that we can move forward in the relationship.
Yes, everybody has an internal meter like that tells us when we are on green and everything is great and peaceful, and then we're getting over into the amber where we are getting warm and certain things that are being said are really agitating and frustrating. And then when we're in red, we're shut down. There's no communication that's going on. You don't care anymore. You're really about insulting. So that's when you recognize where you are in that process and be willing to dial it back. And that will require your partner being able to call you on that.
That's
like
right.
These are part of the rules. I've already established that we're not going to do X, Y, and Z. And that you have the right to check me, or I can self-check when I know that I'm getting frustrated and I'm getting angry and that meter is gone to red. We have to be accountable to our own rules and our own boundaries.
And you got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. See, a lot of us want to stay in our comfort zone. We want to stay in our safe place, but sometimes you don't resolve things. You know, I've always said that there's a gift in crisis.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you have crisis, it forces you to have conversations that you typically wouldn't have had. And even in the back and forth tug of war, sometimes that could be beneficial for a relationship, because the reason why so many couples have peace is because they avoid each other. They never talk about anything. And as long as we can keep the peace, listen, how was the week? The week was great. Well, why? Because we didn't get into an argument.
Right.
So now you're equating a lack of an argument as a good relationship.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the case.
Absolutely.
And so you got to be able to have conversations to push that relationship forward.
Right. Ignoring each other and you going to the left and the other one going to the right is not resolving any communication. The goal here is to be heard so that you're communicating and resolving these problems so that these problems don't continue to arise. But if you're avoiding each other, then the problems continue to grow. You continue kicking it under the rug. And one day there will be some kind of explosion. It'll be a lot harder to deal with when you've got 100 things that have been undealt with versus one.
And the next thing, how to diffuse an argument, making a decision to find the power of agreement between you and your spouse. There's so many couples who live life with the mantra, you know what? We just agree to disagree. And if you're choosing to agree to disagree for the remainder of your relationship, you'll never have a place where you come together. Like, most people rather talk about what they don't like, and then by process of elimination, we'll figure out where there's commonality, than really looking at it from a different perspective and determining what they do like and where they do agree and where they can come together as a couple. And I think that if you are in the mode, or if you have a habit of always finding discord and disagreement and what separates us, you'll never get to the place where you enter into oneness. And so you've got to be able to, in essence, submit to something that you both agree to. Like, for instance, we've made the Bible final authority in our marriage. So when we're at a place of disagreement, well, what does the word say? Because if we can both submit to the word, we'll find the truth of what to bring back into our relationship.
Yes, indeed. And that's really powerful. And that was a huge growth for me to understand that since we submit to the word, and that's our final authority, that means that I can go there and find some kind of commonality to make sure that I move into agreement with Hassani. Because once you move into agreement with your spouse, that's where there is a release of power and authority, and you can move mountains. But when you are in disagreement and you always, in competition, and if I say yes, you say no, if it's up, it's down, like you're always in competition because your goal is to be right, you will have exactly what you desire. You'll have being right. And that's it. You won't have the marriage that you desire because you're too determined to be right. Hey, Nigel, we see, I agree. You have to be able to deal with uncomfortable conversations.
There it is.
So, find that final authority. It should be the Lord should be final authority over your marriage because he was the one that established it. This is the first institution that he established. But when you realize that I don't need to be right, what I need to do is find out what can I come into agreement in? Where can we find common ground? Because there are some times where there's some things that you just aren't going to agree with ever. You're going to have to find some way to negotiate around certain situations to move forward. But where you can find agreement and connect, that right there is where your power is. And that's where you need to move.
And also, if you reach the place where you just can't get on the same page, that's when you bring a third party in. There's power in counseling,
Yes.
there's power in a coach, there's power in a community, a system that guides you both through a process where neither of you are in the driver's seat. You're actually in the passenger seat. You got your seatbelt on and you're allowing someone else to steer and guide that journey for you. Because when you do that, that means that at least you both are teachable.
Yes.
Right? If you're teachable and you have a high willingness to learn and a high willingness to change, you can move mountains in your relationship. And guess what? That's why we're excited about what's happening tonight. Tonight is the third night, day 3 of the Audacity of Marriage experience, the home edition. Listen, many of you have been joining us and you've been receiving all types of great information and inspiration, hearing from us, hearing from other couples. Well, it's not too late. There's a link right here in this post. If you missed the first 2 days, there's still time for you to get in. We're going to be talking about some amazing things that you do not want to miss on tonight.
Yes.
So listen, register. All right. You'll get an email. You'll get a link to log in. We're going to be talking about being an explorer. We're going to be talking about sex and intimacy and
reconnecting with your spouse is going to be good. So if you are in a relationship where you're having issues with intimacy, sex, connecting, get on tonight. We have some solutions. We're going to blow your mind.
So guys, we love you. And we hope that you have an amazing weekend and we'll see you on Monday.
Bye-bye.